Hey everybody, thank you for joining my channel, The Magical Solution. My name is Leilani, and this is how we grow. We are doing our Monday weekly book club, and we are moving forward with the rest of chapter 13. Now, if you are joining me for the first time, this particular channel and this particular night is when we have our book club and we pick a book regarding anything spiritual that has anything to do with the BIPOC community, specifically Indigenous practices of Turtle Island. And we go through books and we read them, and that's it. And I don't want you to feel like you're behind. All the previous books that we've read so far are on my YouTube channel, so make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share. So tonight we are finishing up chapter 13 of The Gospel According to Spiritism, written by Allan Kardec. And the part that we left off at from the last round was the Spirit's teaching. Now, leave me a comment for those who were here the last time, and I see a few of you. What was the subject that we were talking about prior to the Spirit's teaching that we're going to talk about tonight? If you remember, leave a comment below. And in the meantime, I will speak to the newcomers. The Gospel According to Spiritism is book 3 in an entire series authored by Allan Kardec. That's considered sort of like the codex of Spiritism, right? And so the first book is the Spirit's book. We did that. The second book is the Medium's book. We did that. And now we are on the Gospel According to Spiritism, which is sort of Spiritism's interpretation of certain passages in the Bible, and the Spirit's sort of interpretation and ideas regarding those things from the Bible. So what did we have? Began waiting. Someone in TikTok. Yes, so it's sort of this idea that what we were talking about up to this point was, should we forgive our enemies? Is it natural to, turn the other cheek? What does love thy neighbor mean? So we were very much involved in sort of the social contract, if you will, with our spiritual practices and our social practices, right? So if we are wrongdoed, should we forgive? Should it be an eye for an eye, et cetera, right? So we covered all that in the last video, and now we're going to get the Spirit's interpretation of those passages that we read last week. And the subcategory for the first Spirit is entitled Vengeance. The Spirit who speaks these words are Jules Oliver in Paris in 1862. Vengeance is one of the last remnants arising from barbaric customs that tend to be erased among human beings. Like dueling, it is one of the last vestiges of those savage customs under which humankind struggled at the beginning of the Christian era. This is why vengeance is a sure indication of the backwardness of the persons who indulge in it and of the spirits who can still inspire it. Therefore, my friends, this sentiment must never live within the heart of anyone who claims to be a spiritist. As you well know, vengeance is so contrary to Christ's prescription, forgive your enemies, that those who refuse to forgive not only are not spiritists, but they are not even Christians. Vengeance is all the more ruinous when falsehood and malice are its assiduous companions. In fact, those who indulge in this deadly and blind passion almost never seek revenge openly. When it is the strongest, they fall like ferocious beasts upon those whom they call their enemies, when the sight of them inflames their passion, anger, and hatred. However, more often than not, they put on hypocritical appearances, hiding in the depths of their hearts the bad sentiments that animate them. They secretly follow their unsuspecting enemies in the darkness and wait for the opportune moment to strike without endangering themselves. Hiding from them, they incessantly watch them. They prepare hateful traps for them, and when the opportunity arises, they pour the poison in the cup. When their hatred does not reach such extremes, they attack their enemies' honor and affections. They do not recoil from using slander, and their perfidious insinuations, skillfully sown on their four winds, grow larger along the way. Consequently, when those who are being persecuted show up in places where their poisonous breath has passed, they are astonished at encountering cold faces where they used to find friendly and benevolent ones. They are stupefied when hands previously extended now refuse to shake theirs. And finally, they are shattered when their dearest friends and relatives avoid and run from them. Ah, cowards who avenge themselves like this are 100 times guiltier than those who go straight to their enemies and insult them to their faces. Thus, be gone with such savage customs. Be gone with the ways of days gone by. Any spiritist who today still claims to have the right to seek vengeance would be unworthy of being counted any longer in the phalanx that has taken as their motto, "Without charity, there is no salvation." But no, I could never hold to the idea that a member of the great Spiritist family could in the future ever yield to the impulse of vengeance instead of forgiveness. Oof. This next subcategory is entitled hatred. And the spirit who speaks these words, his name is Fenelon, in Bordeaux, France in 1861. Love one another and you will be happy. Above all, assume the duty of loving those who inspire you with indifference, hatred, or scorn. Christ, whom you should make your model, gave you an example of such devotion, a missionary of love. He loved to the point of giving his blood and his life. The sacrifice that obliges you to love those who offend and persecute is painful, but it is precisely this type of sacrifice that will rise you above them. If you hate them as they hate you, you are worth no more than they are. Such sacrifice is the spotless host offered to God on the altar of your hearts, a sweet-smelling host whose fragrance rises up to him. Even though the law of love wants us to love our brothers and sisters without distinction, it does not shield the heart against harmful conduct. On the contrary, such conduct is the most painful trial. I know it well, because during my last earthly existence, I experienced such torment. But God is ever present and punishes either in this life or in the next all those who disregard the law of love. My dear children, do not forget that love brings us close to God, whereas hate keeps us from him. So remember, in the previous chapter that we read last week, remember what we spoke about when he was describing this idea of loving your enemies, right? We're not saying loving your enemies like in a romantic way. We're not saying loving your enemies in terms of, letting all of their behavior slide or condoning it in some way, or even agreeing with it in some capacity. They're not talking about love in that sense. They're talking about loving your brother as in the forgiveness of love, right? This idea of extending a hand regardless of past wrongs, right? Because every day is a new opportunity for this person to do right. Every action is a new opportunity for this person to do right. And as a spiritist, right, what they're talking about here is that your goal is not only to elevate yourself, but to elevate your brothers and sisters in any given opportunity, right? And it's not pushing anything. You're not giving an agenda. You're simply modeling the behavior that you seek to see in the world. So that's what they're talking about here. Okay, so this next section is on the subject of dueling, throwing hands, right? So, this is again written in the 1800s, so dueling. And this is the words of Aldolf, the Bishop of Algar. And he said these words in Marmande in 1861. The truly great are only those who, regarding life as a voyage that must lead them to an objective, make little ado about the rough spots along the way, and never allow themselves for an instant to detour from the upright path. With their eyes constantly set on their objective, it matters little to them that the barbs and thorns of the path threaten to cause them scratches. These grazes them without harming them, and they stay on course. To expose their lives by avenging themselves for an offense is to recoil before life's trials. It is always a crime in God's eyes, and if you were not enthralled as you are by your prejudices, dueling would be deemed a ridiculous and supreme folly to human eyes. Death resulting from such a duel is a crime of homicide. Your own legislation recognizes this as a fact. No one has the right, in any event, to make an attempt on the life of his fellow man. It is a crime in the eyes of God, who has traced out your line of conduct. Here, more than anywhere else, you are judges of your own case. Remember that you will be forgiven only according to how you yourselves have forgiven. Through forgiving, you draw nearer to the Divine One, for clemency is the brother of power. As long as one drop of human blood runs, hold on 1 second. Babe, you gotta check the pot pie. Because I want that pot pie.
What brand is it?
Boston Market. Okay. Through forgiving, you draw nearer to the Divine One, for clemency is the brother of power. As long as one drop of human blood runs over the earth as the result of human hands, the true kingdom of God will not have arrived. The kingdom of peace and love, which must banish animosity, discord, and war from your globe forever. Then the word duel will no longer exist in your language except as a far-off, vague memory of a past which once was. Men will recognize among themselves no other antagonism than the noble rivalry of doing the good. I wholeheartedly agree with this. I am definitely a, don't kill nobody kind of person. Especially when it comes from a place of vengeance and hatred. This is not to say you cannot defend yourself. This is not to say that certain actions are not meant for you to impulsively have on your path, right? So just be gentle with yourself. It continues. In certain cases, dueling may, of course, be a proof of physical courage and of disdain for life, but it is incontestably a proof of moral cowardice, as is also the case of suicide. Pause right here, right? So pause. Anyone who has followed me for any extended period of time knows my feelings about the Spiritist feelings about suicide, right? It's definitely not a high standing order, and we all understand why, but I think it definitely gets blown out of proportion to really blame the victim. And now that we understand that suicide is much more than a callous act, right? It's not callous, right? This is something that of a suffering person. This is an action of a suffering person. So really take with a grain of salt what these next words are going to say, okay, with regards to that. The suicide does not have the courage to endure the vicissitudes of life. The dueler does not have the courage to endure offenses. Did Christ not tell you that there is more honor and courage in offering the left cheek to someone who has struck your right one than to avenge an offense? In the Garden of Olives, did Christ not tell Peter, "Put your sword back in its sheath, because those who kill with the sword shall die by the sword"? With these words, does Jesus not condemn dueling forever? In fact, my children, what courage is this: born of a violent, bloody, and wrathful temperament that rants and raves at that first offense? Where is the greatness of soul of him who, at the least offense, wants to wash it with blood? Let him tremble, because in the depths of his conscience, a voice will always cry out to him, Cain, Cain, what have you done to your brother? He will tell this voice, it was necessary to spill this blood in order to save my honor. However, this voice will reply to him, you wanted to save your honor before men for the few moments that remain for you to live on the earth, but you do not think about saving it before God, you poor fool. How much blood would Christ ask of you for all the offenses he received? You have not only wounded him with the thorns and the lance, you have not only nailed him to the gibbet, but in the midst of his agony, you could hear the mockery you heaped on him. After such outrages, what reparation has he asked of you? The last cry of the Lamb was a prayer for his executioners. Oh, like him, forgive and pray for those who offend you. Thanks, babe. My pot pie made it.
Anything else?
No, I'm good.
Anything else?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Come on, Gigi.
Oh, chicken pot pie. It's so good. Oh my gosh, it's so good, you guys. Okay. Friends, remember this precept. Love one another. And then to the blow given out of hate, you will respond with a smile, and to the offense with forgiveness. Of course, the world will rise up in fury and treat you as a coward. Hold your head high and show that, like Christ, you are not afraid to have your brow laden with thorns. But your hand does not want to be the accomplice in a homicide that supposedly authorizes a false appearance of honor, but what actually amounts to nothing more than pride and self-centeredness. In creating you, did God give you the right of life and death over one another? No, he gave such right only to nature for reforming and rebuilding itself. But to you, he did not permit you to dispose even of yourselves. Like the suicide, the doer will be marked with blood when he appears before God, and the sovereign judge reserves to both harsh and long punishment. If God has threatened with his justice him who says Raka to his brother, how much more severe will the punishment be for him who appears before God with hands red and with blood of his brother? That was said by Saint Augustine in Paris in 1862. This next part, which is still on the subject of dueling and suicide and taking of life, this next part is going to be spoken by a protector spirit in Bordeaux in 1861. Oh man, this pot pie is way too hot to eat. Nope, not ready. Not ready. Mm-mm. Like the practice known in a former age as the judgment of God, the duel is one of those barbaric institutions that still govern society. However, what would you say if you saw two adversaries being immersed in a boiling water or submitted to the contact of red-hot iron in order to settle their quarrels, with the one enduring the test in a better matter being considered the one in the right? You would call such a custom ludicrous. The duel is even worse. For the skillful dueler, it is murder committed in cold blood with deliberate premeditation because he is sure of the blow he will deliver, and for his adversary almost certain to succumb. Due to his weakness and ineptitude, it is suicide committed with the coldest reflection. I know that oftentimes one seeks to avoid this alternative by relying on equally criminal chance. Isn't that, however, a return in a different form to the judgment of God of the Middle Ages, and yet during that era, one would be infinitely less guilty. The very name judgment of God implies faith, naive certainty, but at least a faith in the justice of God, who could not allow an innocent person to succumb. Whereas in the duel, one relies on brute strength in such a way that quite often it is the offended party who dies. Oh, stupid conceit, foolish vanity, and insane pride, when will you be replaced by Christian charity, love for one's neighbor, and the humility that Christ exemplified and prescribed? Only then will those monstrous prejudices that still govern humankind and which laws are powerless to repress disappear. For it is not enough to prohibit evil and prescribe the good. The good and the horror of evil must dwell in the human heart. Woo! That is a righteous spirit right there that's speaking. Woo! Okay, the next spirit who's going to speak is Francis Xavier in 1861. What will people think of me, you often say, if I refuse the reputation asked of me, or if I do not demand it from someone who has offended me? Those who are foolish like you, backward persons, will find fault with you. But those who have been enlightened by the beacon of mental and moral progress will say that you are acting in accordance with true wisdom. Reflect a bit because of a word, many times said thoughtlessly or inoffensively on the part of one of your brothers. Your pride feels bruised and you respond to him in a harsh manner. A confrontation ensues. Before that critical moment arrives, do you ask yourself if you're acting like a Christian? What will you owe society if you deprive it of one of its members? Do you think of the remorse for having deprived a wife of her husband, a mother of her son, and children of their father and their support? Certainly, the one who has offended you owes reparation. However, would it not be more honorable for him to do so voluntarily in recognition of his wrongs than to endanger the life of the one who was right to complain? As for the offended man, I concur that sometimes one might find oneself gravely insulted, either personally or regarding those who are dear to us. It is not only self-centeredness that comes into play, a heart is wounded and suffering. But besides being foolish for risking his life in confrontation with a wretched capable of an infamy, it's this wretch dies. If this wretch dies, will the affront, whatever it was, cease to exist? Does not split blood give more notoriety to the fact which, if false, would fall by itself, and if true, should be buried in silence? Thus, the only thing left would be that vengeance was satisfied. Alas, it is a sad satisfaction that often, even in this life, triggers bitter remorse. And if it is the offended party that dies, where is the reparation? When charity becomes the rule of conduct for humans, they will conform their words and actions to this maxim: do not do unto others what you would not want them to do unto you. Then all causes of dissension will disappear, and with them the cause of duels and wars, which are actually duels between people. This next part is going to be the words of Augustine in 1861. Woo, still hot, real hot. The man of the world, the happy man, who because of an offensive word or a slight matter throws away the life that has come to him from God, or throws away the life of his fellow man, a life that belongs to God alone, is 100 times guiltier than the wretch who, compelled by greed or sometimes by necessity, goes into someone's home to steal what he covets and kills those who stand in his way. The latter is almost always an uneducated man with only imperfect notions of good and evil. whereas the dueler almost always belongs to the more educated class. One kills brutally and the other with method and politeness, which makes society excuse him. I would even add that the dueler is infinitely guiltier than the wretch who yields to a sentiment of revenge and kills in a moment of exacerbation. The dueler cannot use a fit of passion as an excuse because between the offense and the reparation, there is always time to reflect. Hence, he acts coldly and with premeditation. Everything is calculated and studied in order to be more surely that he is to slay his adversary. It is true that he also endangers his own life, and this is what justifies the duel in the eyes of the world, because it is seen as an act of courage and a disdain for one's own life. However, is there true courage when one is sure of himself? The duel, a remnant of barbaric times in which might makes right, was the law, will disappear with a saner appreciation of the true point of honor and to the degree that people put a more ardent faith in the future. Whew. Okay. This last piece is called The Remark. It's just written by Allan Kardec. Duels are becoming rarer and rarer, and if tragic examples of them are still seen from time to time, their number cannot be compared to what it used to be. Formerly, a man cannot leave his home without foreseeing an encounter, thus always taking precautions. A characteristic sign of the customs of those times and people was the habit of carrying concealed or unconcealed offensive or defensive weapons. The abolition of such usage demonstrates the softening of customs, and it is interesting to follow this gradation from the time in which knights did not ride out except covered in armor and clutching a lance, to when men start carrying a simple sword more as a decoration and a blazon than a weapon of aggression. Another indication regarding customs is that formerly one-on-one combat took place right in the street in front of a crowd. They stayed back in order to leave the area free, whereas nowadays all is done in secret. Nowadays, the death of a man is an event that causes commotion, and it is talked about. In the past, no one paid any attention to it. Spiritism will remove these last vestiges of barbarity, instilling humankind with the spirit of charity and fraternity. And as you can see, Spiritism still has a long-ass way to go, because now violence and dueling and vengeance and all this is now televised. It is part of our entertainment. So Spiritism really failed on that one. Hoping we can let's get our shit together, you know? What time is it? 7:30. Nice. So now we can finally move on to chapter 13. We were on basically 12b. Okay. So chapter 13 is entitled, "Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." This is a quote that my father used to quote all the time, and it's actually one of my favorites too. So I'm interested in seeing what they have to say about this, and I'm interested in sharing it with you. And I'm also biding time because I really, really want to eat my pot pie. I'm so hungry. Okay. So the subcategories of this chapter is do good without ostentation, hidden misfortunes, the widow's mite, invite the poor and the lame, give without expecting recompense. And then, of course, the Spirit's teachings. And the Spirit's teachings are going to cover material charity and moral charity, beneficence, compassion, orphans, benefits repaid with ingratitude, and exclusive beneficence. So let's do this. Do good without ostentation. We are going to quote Matthew chapter 8, verses 1 through 4. Here we go. Be careful not to do your good works before men in order to be seen by them. Otherwise, you will not receive recompense from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, whenever you give alms, do not sound the trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and streets in order to be praised by men. Verily, I say to you that they have received their reward. But whenever you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms will be in secret, and your Father who sees what has happened in secret will reward you. After Jesus had come down from the mountain, a large crowd of people followed him. At the same time, a leper came to meet him and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if you will, can you heal me? Jesus reached out to him, touched him, and said, I will it. Be healed. In that same instant, the leprosy was healed. Then Jesus said to him, do not tell anyone about this, but go and show yourself to the priests and offer the gift prescribed by Moses, so that it may serve as a testimony to them. Doing good without ostentation has great merit. Hiding the hand that gives is even more meritorious. It is an incontestable sign of great moral elevation, for in order to view things from a higher state than the ordinary, one must look past the present life and identify with the future life. In other words, one must place oneself above humanity in order to renounce the satisfaction that wants to be seen by others and to wait for approval by God. Those who prefer others' approval to God's approval show that they have more faith in others than in God, and that the present life is worth more than the future life. Or even that they do not believe in the future life at all. If they say otherwise, they act as if they do not believe in what they say. How many there are who give only in the hopes that the beneficiary will shout that benefit from the rooftops? Who gives large sums in broad daylight, but would not give a cent in darkness? This is why Jesus stated that those who do not do good ostentatiously have already received their reward. Who do good, sorry. In fact, those who seek their own glorification on earth because of the good that they have already been paid, God owes them nothing more. The only thing that remains for them to receive is punishment for their pride. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, is an image that wonderfully characterizes modest beneficence. However, if there is such a thing as true modesty, there is also such a thing as feigned modesty, the simulation of modesty. There are people who hide the hand that gives, letting a small portion to be shown while looking to see if anyone is watching, then hiding the hand. An unworthy parody on the maxims of Christ. If other people despise prideful benefactors, how will God regard them? They too have received their reward on earth. They have been seen, and they are quite happy because of it. That is all they will have. And what will be the reward for those who make their benefits weigh heavily on their beneficiaries? Those who in some way demand to be acknowledged by them, making them feel their position by extolling the price of the sacrifices they have imposed on themselves for their sake. Oh, there is not even an earthly reward for these givers because they are deprived of the sweet satisfaction of hearing their name blessed. And that is the first punishment for their pride. Instead of rising up to heaven, the tears they dry in the interest of their vanity fall back upon the heart of the afflicted and ulcerated. The good they do is without profit to themselves, for it is deplored, and every deplored benefit is a false and worthless coin. Kindness without ostentation has a twofold merit. Besides material charity, it portrays moral charity. It spares the susceptibility of its beneficiaries and enables them to accept the benefit without bruising their self esteem and safeguards their human dignity because they will accept a service but will not accept a handout. Now, changing a service into a handout because of the way it is rendered is to humiliate the one who receives it. And there is always pride and malice involved in humiliating another person. True charity, on the other hand, is sensitive and skillful in concealing the benefit rendered and in avoiding the least harmful appearances, since any moral offense adds to the suffering born from need. This sort of charity is able to find kind and affable words that put beneficiaries at ease in the presence of their benefactors, whereas prideful charity crushes them. The sublime aspect of true generosity is present when benefactors switch roles and find a way for themselves to appear to be the actual beneficiaries of those to whom they render their service. That is the meaning of the words, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is giving. Oof. Okay, let me see what time it is. Good, we have time for one more passage, maybe two, because they're kind of short actually. So this next section is entitled Hidden Misfortunes. And I have a feeling I know where this is going, but let's continue moving on. Charity manifests during great calamities, and one sees a generous drive to repair the damage. However, alongside these general disasters, there are thousands of private ones that go unnoticed, of people lying on beds of misery without complaining. These discreet and hidden misfortunes are the ones that true generosity knows how to find without waiting for the victims to come asking for assistance. Who is this woman of distinction, dressed in a simple but careful manner, accompanied by a girl also dressed modestly? She enters a squalid looking house where she is obviously well known because she is greeted respectfully at the door. Where is she going? She goes upstairs to the attic. A mother is living there, surrounded by little children. At the woman's arrival, joy shines on those gaunt faces. She has come to soothe all of their pain. She has brought what they need, along with gentle and consoling words that enable them to accept the benefit without being ashamed for their unfortunate, for these unfortunates or professional beggars. The father is in the hospital, and while he is there, the mother cannot provide for their needs. Thanks to this woman, these poor children will experience neither cold nor hunger. They will go to school dressed warmly, and their mother's milk will not dry up for the littlest ones. If any of them are ill, no material care will be denied. From there, she goes to the hospital to bring a little comfort to the father and to put his mind at ease regarding his family's state of affairs. On the street corner awaits a carriage, which is a veritable stockroom of everything she takes to the many wards whom she visits one after another. She asks them neither about their beliefs nor their opinions, for to her all people are brothers and sisters, all are children of God. When she has finished her rounds, she tells herself, my day has begun very well. What is her name? Where does she live? No one knows. Her unfortunate, it is a name that reveals nothing. However, she is the angel of consolation. And at night, a symphony of blessings rises to the Father on her behalf. Catholics, Jews, Protestants, they all bless her. Why does she dress so simply? It is because she does not wish to insult poverty with luxury. Why does her young daughter accompany her? In order to teach her how beneficence should be practiced. The daughter who also wants to practice charity, but her mother asks her, What could you give, my child, since you have nothing of your own? If I give you something to pass on to others, what merit will you have? In reality, I would be the one practicing charity. If you were to receive the merit, it would not be just. When we visit the sick, you help me care for them, and giving of oneself is to give something. Doesn't that seem sufficient to you? Well, then, nothing could be simpler. Learn to make useful articles and to make clothes for the little ones. That way, you will be giving something that has come from you yourself. Thus, this truly Christian mother is educating her daughter in the practice of the virtues taught by Christ. Is she a spiritist? What does it matter? At home, she is a woman of the world because her position requires it. However, the world does not know what she does because she wants no other approval except from God and her own conscience. However, one day, an unforeseen turn of events brings one of her wards to her home, selling handmade articles. She recognizes her benefactress and wants to bless her. Hush, says her benefactress. Do not tell anyone. Jesus also spoke in such a manner. Okay, I think we are at a good point. So we are still in chapter 13, and we are leaving off at the subject of the widow's mite. Okay. So I am now going to open the forum to questions. Anybody have any questions about what we just read? About any of the previous books that we read? About Spiritism, Espiritismo, psychic mediumship as a whole? You let me know. Hi. Hi, everyone. Aw. Okay. Well, then, if that's the case, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. Right? So I'm here Monday nights, I'm here Sunday nights, and I'm going to be adding another night during the week. And then I teach my classes on Fridays. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share. If you want to hit the little bell button at the top so that you get reminders. Otherwise, you'll know pretty much my whereabouts on the cover page of my website, because that's going to be updated more frequently, which is www.themagicalsolution.com. And I want to say thank you guys so much for hanging out. You know, this is part of your growth. This is part of your process as well. And I'm really honored to be a part of your journey in this, even in this small way, and to help make things clear for you. I am so sorry. My dog acts like nobody feeds her in this house, but she really just wants my chicken pot pie. That being said, have a beautiful night, everyone, and I will talk to you all soon. This is how we grow.